I was going to say Minister Humphreys, but I would like to thank the Minister, although she's not here. She gave a very inspiring speech, I thought, very good. Elected reps, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to me this morning. Obviously, in our case, in the case of Abbeyleix, we have got the set piece. I mean, everybody knows that, but as we probably also know, heritage doesn't put food on tables. It takes a lot more than just that, and I need to look backwards in order to go forward, because we realised about 10 years ago that the motorway was coming, and that it meant a paradigm shift in terms of the way our town was going to function thereafter. So we had to make a plan, we had to get our act together, and it meant involving collaboration with all of the various groups, all of the various businesses, and I think that should, I hope, come across as a key theme, that collaborative effort. I know the Minister mentioned it, and it was mentioned by Conor, my previous, the man who spoke before me. You cannot underline or under-stress the need for that collaborative engagement. Abbeyleix, as you may know, sits in the centre of, it's in South Laois, right in the heart of the Midlands. Flat, plain, beautiful, not the most exciting, but as I hope to show you later on, we have lots and lots on our doorstep that's of value. Just a very short potted history. The town originally was started on the River Nore, to the south of where it is currently. It was a monastic settlement set up by the Cistercian monks out of Baltinglass. It was a sister monastery from Baltinglass. And there, on the banks of the Nore was where the town originally sat. And all the way through, the monastery would have been the hub of that. It's since gone. It was obviously dissolved along with all the others, and became a ruin. It was actually razed and it's gone, unfortunately. We have nothing left of that settlement. But as we were the first counties to be planted, Laois and Abbeyleix, as you will know, we had a property speculator, Denny Mouchamp, who managed to get hold of the estate, what is currently Abbeyleix, and some 20-odd thousand acres around it. And he bought the estate. He passed it on through the line to what would eventually end up being the first Viscount de Vesey in the mid-18th century. And that, has to be said, was a lucky thing, because Thomas Vesey had a vision and had fantastic ideas about how the place could move forward. In 1774, he commissioned and built his own house, which is now Abbeyleix House, which is in private ownership to the south, and approximate to where the original monastic settlement was. And then moved the town, lock stock, over a period of about 10 years. Over 200 houses were, as we're told, razed to the ground and moved to the current location. So it was laid out in its current location from about 1770 through to 1790. And then it was then known as the new Abbeyleix. 2 words, by the way, not one. We had a railway station, which again, the successor of Thomas Vesey put a railway station, got us onto the map basically, got us connected to Kilkenny, got us connected to Marlborough, Portlaoise, and up into Dublin by rail. And given that backdrop to that was the famine wasn't long before, it's incredible to consider that so much private investment was made at a time when the country was literally on its knees. And then the M7, M8 bypass came in 2010, and that was the last sort of major paradigm shift we've seen. And I want to really just focus on the original founding principles of the town, because the sustainable principles that it was set up upon are incredibly prescient and incredibly relevant to us and our future vision for the town. Those founding principles are, as a town planner, they're fundamental things that we would consider to be critically important: employment, education, transport, market, church, water, sanitation, all of those things, all those key components, they were all in the mix. They were all considered as part of the original. And you'll see from that's the town plan for the very centre of the town. In my own fair hand, I'll say, it was an interesting concept in that at the centre of it all was the marketplace, and the marketplace was the the nub, the hub, the centre, the place about which everything radiated. We had a very wide north-south running street, wide legible planned street layout, very strong architectural style, as you see in photographs coming up, well-defined market, as I say, set up for markets and fairs and for large events. We had very strong connecting vistas to the countryside, and I think that was central to the vision for the place, that it would still remain as part of a rural setting, even though it's urban in itself. It is very much planted into a rural context. We have imposing civic buildings, which you'll see. Now, as we're getting to the heart of it, there were very deep plots. There were half-acre plots, and with an acre elsewhere. They were actually thinking in terms of food production and the market. There was adequate land behind the house to actually grow pigs and sell those pigs into a market outside your front door. I mean, how sustainable is that? We have to use a truck and bring it halfway around the world nowadays. Transport linkages, it was originally on a backwater. It was off the beaten track, and now it became part of a route which ran straight from Dublin through to Cashel. And as a result, we had initially Bianconi, which again connected us into the network. And then, as I mentioned, we had the railway, which followed that and ran for 100 years. Employment was at the base of it as well. We had Western Mills, we had agriculture, and education was a central tenet. There were up to 9 schools within the town within the first 20 years of its being founded. That's kind of unusual. Now, given the fact that they were all private schools and they were all run for multi-denominational, they were all run for, some of them were for young ladies, some of them for more mixed, some of them for men, but they were all set up with particular principles, including things like the Palazzi Institute, which still considered to be at the vanguard of critical thinking about education. Water supply and sanitation, and as I said earlier, an acre allotment per house. So you'll see, I mean, in terms of architectural style, we have something to be very proud of. We've got some incredibly beautiful buildings. We have the one to the bottom left there is actually the Old Market House, which is now our library, which we're tremendously proud of and has won many awards over the years. And the fountain, which was actually erected by the people to the Lord, because they actually were incredibly benevolent. We can't find any evidence of people being evicted or treated badly, especially during the famine, when God knows things must have been impossible. Sir Charles Coe wrote about Abbeyleix back at that time, largely established as a market town, a new and exceedingly neat village, arisen from its ruins. The policy of setting half an acre, I mean, again, he was clever enough to read that as being something quite basic and sustainable. And again, just more views of, how it looks. Now, this is the bit that I enjoy. It's planning, the actual. We have obviously got our statutory plans, which we're very much bound into, and as part of the Heritage Company, we've managed to get an architectural conservation area, which again is bound into that plan. So we have got statutory protection for all of our town centre, not just the protected structures, but everything that sits within that ACA. And we were fortunate back in 2011 to have been granted a fund through the Department of Heritage to do a plan, a sustainable communities plan, which is essentially a public realm plan for the town. It's the best thing that ever happened to us, because what it did was it came at a great time. It was in the midst of this whole, what are we going to do? The road is gone and suddenly the place is quieter. What are we going to do? So that plan, which, if we go on to the next, the Sustainable Communities Plan, again, was bound around a workshop. We had over 60 people in the room originally to actually ask people, you're God for a day, you can add or take from the set that we've got. What are the things that matter to you? And it was interesting, the things that really fell out of that were walking, cycling, connection, things that would be music to the ears of a planner, but to hear it coming from people's voices is fantastic, because it really reinforces our central principles, which are around accessibility and people rather than cars. These are just views that come out of the plan that show you the detail of how we got into describing what was there, describing what was wrong, describing what could happen, the things that might be interventions that would go to help to make a better place. And out of that strategy came a whole raft of potential interventions, which are seen as critical little projects. Some of them are big, some of them are small, some of them are in between. But they were all decided democratically by us that these were the things that mattered. And as you'll see, we've already delivered on a good number of these. We've got our circular walk around Abbeyleix bog, which is again another story I'd like to talk to you about. But it's been incredible in terms of giving us deliverable projects. And we've done that. We've also created a park in an area that was otherwise wasteland. We've the two big projects which are around the centre of the town involve massive investment, and there are things that we have an eye to doing, but as of now, they're long finger. The other things, one of the things that came out from the team, the planners and landscape architects that ran the project for us, was that we didn't have a good arrival experience. It was a very long road in, and suddenly you're there. So they identified a northern bookend and a southern gateway as being a way of kind of improving that vista and improving that arrival experience. Very important. Tidy Towns, of course, they grabbed this with both hands. They loved it. And off we went to the council and various bodies, and we got loads of funding. And we did deal with both of those, as one of them in 2016 for a 1916 centenary. So, talking about sustainability, how can our past inform a sustainable future? Food production, obviously. I'm talking about micro businesses. We're hugely into that, and I'm sure a lot of the leader people here will back us on that. But food production, which is something that was original which was one of the reasons we were set up, is still core. Industry, artisan hub, small rather than big. We don't see big foreign nationals coming in 1,000 jobs at the end of our town. That's not going to happen. And in fact, in a way, we're not looking for that either. We're looking to support and promote the businesses that exist and to look for more to come in. And that's what's happening, in that we have, through the public health realm enhancements, which were very painful, took over a year to do, and virtually closed the town down while it was happening, but so worth it in the longer term. We don't have a great deal of vacancy. We seem to have managed to deal with that quite well. And as I said earlier, when we talk about collaboration, it is the key component. It's the tidy towns, it's the GAA, it's the golf club, it's the various, all of the businesses, everyone needs to get behind the pump, and we do regularly, whether it's for tidy towns or Autumn Floral or whatever it is. And we've had a number of crises down the years where we've had to get our act together. They tried to close a hospital down, so we said, not happening, guys. Sorry, that is simply not happening. We got our act together, we stopped that from happening. Abbeyleix bog was just about to be harvested by Bord na Móna. We found that the EIS was deeply flawed, so we took them to the High Court and proved that they had no right to start that harvesting. So as a consequence of that, we have 500 acres free of charge to run for ourselves as a community amenity. So stand up for yourselves, guys. That's one of the key things that we find is so important. That you'll not get anything unless you look for it, fight for it. And that collaborative thing is so essential to us. And then, I suppose the things that make you different. Distinctiveness. Architectural heritage is a distinctive feature. Your own food, your own brand, your own distinctive retail offer, that's all distinctive, that's all vibrant, that's all vital, that's all stuff that keeps you. People remember that when they stop and have a cup of coffee. Wow, let's have a look in there, let's check that out. You know, look at our library. Challenges. We're not left without any. They're still ongoing, and in fact the road itself has become a major problem in the last 18 months. We've found a massive increase in volumes of heavy goods vehicles in particular, avoiding the toll, coming through Abbeyleix and creating a bloody nightmare again. We're not quite on the news every day as we were, because the only time you ever heard the word Abbeyleix was at the beginning of a traffic bulletin, if you remember back a number of years ago. It's still a problem. We still have sprawl. We still have a huge problem with car parking, like every town in Ireland, but I think we're going to have to learn to get over ourselves in that regard. Protecting and reducing habitat loss. We've worked very long and hard at that, and we've managed to make huge, we've reclaimed huge chunks of green, and we have connected. Thankfully, Abbeyleix bog is straight at the end of the town. So now, from a pollinator's point of view, you've got that direct linkage through the town, through the gardens, through the public spaces, and luckily we hadn't perhaps the carnage that other places had, where there was we were growing too much concrete. Our population is pretty well static. It hasn't really jumped. In the last intercensual period, it actually dropped by about 50 people, which is a bad sustainability indicator, but in a way, it leaves us breathing space for moving forward. Right, there we are. Achievements to date. Well, I mentioned some of the things. The northern bookend and the southern gateway have been implemented. They fell out of the plan, which we're still working with. But, sorry, on to the next one. Thank you. Community garden, which everyone thought that's mad. Why would you give 20 grand to building a community garden? Well, come and have a look at 150 people having their lunch in there once in a while, and you'll see just what that value is. It's incalculable. And in terms of growing, one of the things that we're so keen on is making volunteerism attractive. And this is a classic case of making it attractive, because you can have pizza, for God's sake. You know, that brings them in. Planting trees, protecting, reducing habitat loss. We've seen a lovely reversal of a trend. We've seen a lot of reoccupation. All of those houses that were vacant, made vacant in the 1970s when everybody wanted to live a mile and a half out the road, that's changed. They now want to live in the centre of town. And I think increasingly as a town planner, I think that's where we need to be going. We need to be going towards consolidation of our settlements and putting more people in towns rather than 2.5 miles out the road. And that we're seeing. We've seen 5 families move back into the town centre in the last 18 months. And I understand from looking at planning files that there are a significant number of others that are being considered for similar. So we are seeing that reversal of a trend, and that's a really good thing to see. Continuous public realm enhancements, we have to keep on. It's like anything, talk to tidy towns, what are we doing next? It's not what we did last year, it's what we're doing next year. The brand, Abbeyleix, the gem of the Midlands, we've done that, you'll see it at the end. We've defined what it is, we've actually gone out there and done an exercise to look at what that brand is and what it looks like. We have, we enter every competition we're allowed to, and we tend to win, although we came second in Entente Floral, and we're still waiting for a steward's inquiry on that. And we're not sore losers, we're better winners though. Gold medal Tidy Towns 3 years in a row. Bitterly disappointed that we're not the national winner yet, but that's a target, that's something to aim for. And as I say, I'm representing Entente Floral, great example of pulling all of the community back together and having a common aim to deliver. And I think that's it. Is there one more? Oh, essential ingredients. I suppose if you're asked, you know, what works and what doesn't. Teamwork works. A plan. Don't ever leave home without a plan. You can't do anything without a plan. You have to define your vision, define your strategies, set your objectives, and stick to them. Don't change, stick to them. Collaborate, as I said before, and agree to differ, because let's face it, we do end up having major barneys like every other group in the country, but hey, that's the energy, use it. Work closely with the local authority. Start with the CE. Start with the CE every time. I want to speak to John Mulholland. And he'll always see me. And then you say, which of your directors do I need to speak to in order to deliver X or Y? And he tells me, and I go to him, and then he tells me the engineer that's going to deliver the project, and when. That's how you do it. You start from the top. We start from the bottom, but we also start from the top with our authority. You've got to work closely with your heritage officer. It's lovely to hear comments speak earlier, because Catherine Casey is a diamond, and we have fabulous work with her. She's a pleasure to deal with, and she's so empathetic in terms of understanding our needs. Planning department, we have a very strong relationship with them. Sports and the executive, as I said, we start with them. Skill set is essential. It's really helpful if you've got people with, you know, if you've got architects and planners, we're lucky, we have people like that. You need accountants, you need builders, but more than anything you need volunteers. And they don't all have to be retired. It's been nice to start seeing some 30-year-olds doing it. I know they're hard to attract, but we're working on it. So we've got 1 or 2 getting more involved now that we've made them. Tidy Towns, Central, GAA, Chamber of Commerce, if you have one, great, they're fantastic, they do great work. The Gardaí, great partners. The churches, all of these people are partners. They all help us in doing things. Funding and fundraising. And then finally, don't rely on Facebook. It's fantastic. And we have a website, we have a Facebook page for Abbeyleix, and it's got thousands. The diaspora, God, there are people who left 100 years ago, they're still connected with the place. Brilliant. But if you're relying on it on its own to bring 150 people into a hall, you're missing out. You've got to talk to local radio, you've got to get it in the parish news, you've got to get it in the local newspaper, and more important, you've got to go and knock on a few doors and tell people to tell people. We have a saying we use from when we won the campaign with the hospital was, tell 10 to tell 10, and it works every time. Tell 10 people, you've got to go out and tell 10 more, and they in turn have to do the same. And before you know it, oh, I hear you're doing such a thing, you know, it gets around. It's good. I think that's it.